For centuries, humanity believed that the Galactic Council stood as the protector of peace across the stars, the shining symbol of unity among hundreds of alien races. The beacon of progress and equality, humans trusted them. They obeyed their laws, they fought their wars, and they paid their dues with loyalty and hope. They thought the Council had lifted them from isolation to greatness, giving them a seat among the stars and a voice among the mighty. Yet behind those perfect words, behind the promises of order and light, something dark waited, something that had been buried under centuries of lies. Humanity had been nothing more than a tool, a worker species in a grand empire of deception. The truth began to surface quietly. It started as whispers in the black void of deep space among explorers who listened to the faint signals drifting through forgotten channels. A group of human scientists stationed near the edge of the Orion frontier intercepted strange encrypted transmissions. At first they thought it was simple interference, maybe coded messages from smugglers or pirates, but when they decoded part of it, what they found was beyond imagination. It spoke of entire species erased from history, planets purged when they refused. The Council's laws, civilizations wiped clean and replaced with colonies that followed obediently. The Council called it peacekeeping operations. But the word they used in their secret codes was cleansing. The humans who found the data were horrified. They knew what would happen if they told anyone. They would vanish like the others before them. They sent the data back to Earth quietly through a hidden relay network, one built during the early years of humanity's space expansion. It reached the Defense Command on Earth, where senior officers and analysts examined the evidence in silence. No one spoke for a long time. When the files ended, the room was filled with disbelief and rage. The truth was clear. The Council was not a guardian of peace. It was a master of control, using fear and manipulation to shape the galaxy to its will. And humanity had been helping them, unknowingly providing soldiers, engineers, and fleets for their campaigns, while believing it was for justice. The first reaction was denial. Leaders wanted to believe there was some mistake, but more transmissions followed, and they all said the same thing. Recordings of the Council discussing how to limit human expansion, orders to restrict Earth's influence by economic and political pressure, and plans to replace human colonies with more loyal species in the future. Everything was planned. Even the wars humanity fought had been designed to keep them distracted and dependent. When the truth reached the people of Earth, the fury spread faster than light across every city, every station, and every colony. Screens filled with reports of the Council's betrayal. The words echoed everywhere. They used us. For the first time in a long time, the governments of Earth stopped arguing. They called emergency meetings in orbit around Mars, and every human representative attended. Soldiers spoke beside scientists, generals beside workers, all united by anger. No one cared about politics or power anymore. The only question was what humanity would do now. They could not confront the Council openly, yet not until they were ready. For centuries, humans had built their fleets using Council-approved technology. But deep within the hidden shipyards of Luna and Titan, there were secret projects, ships designed by human minds without alien oversight. Experimental weapons that even the Council feared. Those projects were now pulled from the shadows, while the Council continued to spread their lies, calling the human accusations false propaganda. Earth went silent. The trade ships stopped. The embassies were closed, and the communication channels went dark. The galaxy watched, confused, as humanity withdrew from every diplomatic table. It looked like weakness, but it was not. Humans had learned from history. When the Council first rose to power, other species had tried to resist, but they had done it loudly and openly, and they had been destroyed. Humanity chose patience. They chose preparation. They built quietly, while pretending to be broken and submissive. In the darkness of space, the great shipyards began to glow again. The soundless forges of the moon came alive. Molten metal poured into frames larger than anything ever constructed before. Engineers worked day and night, the airless silence broken only by the hum of machines they built. Ships designed not just to fight but to survive, to endure, to strike without warning. Humanity began creating something the galaxy had never seen before. Warships that were not just machines but symbols of defiance. The workers who built them whispered names for each vessel, names that spoke of pain and hope, of vengeance and justice. Ships like the Aegis, the Solace, the Retribution. The first of the human dreadnoughts took shape, their armor layered with adaptive plating, their cores pulsing with the energy of newborn stars. Every beam, every circuit carried the fury of a species betrayed. No one outside the solar system knew about these ships. They existed only in shadows and silence, guarded by fleets of drones and loyal crews sworn to secrecy. On Earth, people lived between fear and pride. They knew the Council would come one day, demanding answers. But for now, the world was united in purpose. For the first time since the dawn of spaceflight, humanity was one species, one mind, one heartbeat. The younger generation trained as pilots. The older ones designed defenses and strategies. The children grew up watching the stars and dreaming of freedom. News from the colonies told of unity. They were ready to defend themselves, ready to fight if needed. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, in the shining halls of the Council worlds, rumors reached the alien leaders they laughed at. First thinking the humans had lost their minds, they believed that humanity was too young, too emotional, too chaotic to stand against them. They dismissed the reports of silence as weakness. They called Earth the sleeping world, unaware that it was not sleep, but calm. Before a storm, the Council continued their routine, their endless debates and ceremonies, not realizing that the ground beneath their empire was beginning to shake. Back in the Sol system, humanity's leaders gathered in a secret chamber beneath the surface of Mars. They sat in a circle of light, looking at the projection of the Council emblem floating before them. The emblem that once represented peace now felt like an insult. The oldest among them, a general who had served under the Council's flag, spoke quietly, saying the words that would define the new age. We were fooled. But no more. The time for obedience is over. We will not beg for justice. We will take it. His voice was calm, but every person in that room felt the same fire burning inside them. From that day onward, humanity moved as one machine, guided by fury, powered by truth. They began sending out quiet probes to watch the Council's movements, hidden satellites positioned in key sectors, intelligence networks awakened and gathered more evidence. The data showed something terrifying. The Council was preparing new regulations that would strip humanity of its independence within 10 years. Their military fleets were being moved closer to human borders under the excuse of patrol exercises. The Council feared humanity and wanted to cage it before it was too late. The decision was made. Humanity would not wait to be chained. They would prepare to defend themselves. The world governments merged into one command, known simply as the Terran Alliance. Every scientist, every worker, and every soldier became part of the same effort. The shipyards expanded. The energy stations were fortified, and the colonies began to store supplies. People stopped seeing themselves as citizens of nations. They were now humans of Earth, united by anger and purpose. Humanity had never been this strong, this focused. Before, they were preparing for a war. They did not start, but one they would finish. In the silence of space around Neptune, the first of the great dreadnoughts powered up its engines. The light of its reactors glowed like a small sun across the dark void. The crew stood in awe, staring at what they had built. It was not just a warship, it was a promise, a symbol of what humanity could do when pushed too far. Messages spread across the solar system, simple words repeated everywhere. We know the truth. We remember the lies. We will not bow. The Council had no idea what was coming, and as the stars turned above them, humanity waited, hidden in the dark, their fury growing stronger, their silence becoming louder than any words, because when the time came to break that silence, the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence of humanity did not go unnoticed across the galaxy. As weeks passed, the Council began to grow uneasy. Their diplomats sent message after message to Earth, demanding an explanation for the closed embassies and the sudden stop in communication. But Earth gave no answer. The channels stayed cold and quiet, no voice, no light, only static. Even the trade routes that once buzzed with human freighters became empty, as if the species had vanished from the stars altogether. But humanity had not vanished. They were watching, they were waiting, and above all they were building, their anger was no longer wild. It was focused, sharp, and patient, like a blade being forged in fire. The Council leaders met in their grand chamber on the shining world of Verith Prime. The tall glass towers reflected the golden light of the twin suns, and the chamber was filled with hundreds of alien delegates of all shapes and colors, each of them nervous and uneasy. The High Chancellor spoke loudly, trying to calm the crowd, reminding them that humans were only one small race among many, but deep inside even he was afraid, because every report he received was the same. Humans had gone silent, and silence was something the Council had never faced before. From humans they had expected protests, complaints, maybe even desperate negotiations, but not this. Not silence. Silence meant something far worse. It meant defiance. Across the galaxy, the media spoke endlessly about the human silence. The broadcasts called it the quiet storm. While some claimed that humans were planning something, others said they had broken under pressure, that the Council's authority had finally made them surrender. But the truth was, the opposite. Humans were more alive than ever on the surface of Earth. The cities glowed bright with endless activity. Workers filled the shipyards from dawn till dusk. Engineers tested new designs, while scientists created new energy cores, faster, smaller, and more powerful than any before. The orbital yards above Mars expanded every week, adding new docks for ships that no one outside the system was supposed to know about in every home on every colony. People felt it. They could sense that something was coming, and they were no longer afraid. In the underground command centers of the Terran Alliance, plans were being drawn with precision. Entire divisions were assigned to operations with names like ShadowNet and Iron Seed. The old intelligence agencies that once worked separately were now united into one network. Their task was to gather every secret the Council tried to hide. The humans already knew the Council's lies, but now they wanted proof that no one could deny. They wanted to show the galaxy what the Council truly was, and they did it quietly. One transmission at a time, the deep space listening stations picked up encrypted Council communications and broke them one by one, revealing files that spoke of centuries of manipulation and extermination. On the dark side of Luna, the great assembly hangar opened its gates to reveal the second human dreadnought, the Retribution, its hull black as obsidian, its edges sharp and smooth like a blade. It was larger than anything the Council had ever built, and every inch of it was made by human hands. Not a single alien component inside it was powered by the new fusion drive systems developed by the scientists of Mars. A system so efficient that it could travel half the galaxy without needing to refuel. When it launched for the first time, the crew stood in silence, watching the Earth below. Glowing blue and white, the captain spoke quietly over the ship's intercom, saying, "We will protect what is ours, and we will never kneel again." But not all humans believed that war was the only answer. Some still wanted peace, and tried to send hidden messages to the Council, warning them not to provoke humanity further. But those messages never reached their destination. The Council intercepted them and twisted their meaning, sending back false replies designed to make humanity look dangerous and unstable. Soon, every major Council network broadcasted the same message: humanity is preparing for war. They are building weapons of mass destruction. They must be stopped before it is too late. The galaxy began to shift in response. Council fleets started to move quietly toward human space under the excuse of joint security patrols. They stationed ships near the borders of the Sol system, but dared not enter. Not yet. The human defense network around their home system had grown stronger with each passing week. Dozens of new defense satellites orbited the planets, ready to strike any vessel that crossed into their territory. The humans watched the Council fleets through powerful telescopes and sensors, marking every movement. They said nothing. They simply recorded everything and prepared. In the great underground hangar beneath the frozen surface of Europa, an entire team of scientists worked on a weapon unlike any seen before. It was not a weapon of destruction, but of truth. A massive data relay system that could send information across the galaxy in seconds. The plan was simple. If the Council would not let the truth spread, then humanity would send it themselves. They would broadcast the hidden files, the secret transmissions, and the images of the Council's crimes to every corner of the galaxy all at once, so no one could hide it again. This project was called the Dawn Network, and its engineers worked day and night to make it ready. On the Council side, panic started to grow. The alien ambassadors argued endlessly about what to do. Some said humanity should be cut off completely. Others demanded that the Council send a peace envoy before things went too far. Finally, they agreed to send one last team to Earth, led by a respected alien diplomat named Vural, who had once been an ally to humanity during their first contact years ago. He believed he could reason with them. He traveled to the edge of the Sol system under heavy escort, but when his fleet reached the border, they were stopped by a single human vessel. It was not one of the new dreadnoughts, but an old cruiser painted black, without markings. The alien ship sent out greetings and requests for passage, but the human ship did not reply. It only sent one short transmission. "You are not welcome here." The alien diplomat tried again, asking for permission to deliver a message to Earth. The human ship waited for a long moment before replying. "We remember your lies, go back." The alien fleet hesitated. They were not armed for battle, and their sensors showed many human ships hidden among the asteroids watching silently. The diplomat understood the message and turned his ships away as he left. He whispered to his crew that humanity was no longer the same. They had changed. They were no longer asking for permission. They were demanding respect. When he returned to the council and told them what happened, no one believed him. They called his story exaggerated, but deep down, everyone in that chamber felt fear for the first time in generations. As months passed, the Terran Alliance completed more ships, hundreds of them ranging from small fighters to massive carriers. Every pilot trained harder than ever. Every captain learned new tactics for fighting the Council's fleets. The human military became something the galaxy had never seen before, disciplined, silent, and united under one goal. They did not speak of victory, they spoke of survival. They fought simulations daily, preparing for any possible attack. They knew the Council would come sooner or later, and when it did, they would be ready. The people of Earth watched the skies. With pride, there was no panic. Only determination. Streets that were once filled with political arguments were now filled with workers, volunteers, and families helping each other. Humanity had become a single heartbeat, and even those who had once doubted now believed that their survival depended on unity. They built shelters. They stocked resources, and they learned to live under the shadow of what was coming. But they were not afraid, they were angry, and that anger had become strength. Meanwhile, small signs began to appear across the galaxy. The Council's allies were starting to question their loyalty. Some of the smaller species who had suffered under the Council's rule began to look toward Earth, hoping that the rumors of human defiance were true. Quiet revolt started on distant worlds where people demanded freedom. Whispers spread through the markets and the ports. They say the humans know the truth. They say they will show everyone soon. Inside the hidden control room of the Dawn Network, the last systems were finally activated. The human engineers smiled as the screens came alive. The machine was ready. It could reach every corner of the known galaxy through encrypted subspace channels. All they needed was the right moment to send their message, the moment when the Council made its first move. And when that happened, the truth would be unleashed for all to see. The humans waited for that signal and prepared for the storm that was about to begin. The Council thought they still held control, but in reality their power was already breaking. The foundation of their empire was cracking, and they did not even see it coming. For every ship they moved, for every spy they sent, humanity knew and watched and learned. The fury that had once burned like fire was now cold and precise. The humans had become something new, something the galaxy had never faced before. They were quiet, but behind that quiet was strength. And when they finally spoke, the stars themselves would tremble. The Council fleets began to grow restless along the border of human spaceships came and went every day, their lights blinking in the endless dark. They called it routine patrol. But everyone in the galaxy knew what it really was. It was intimidation. The Council wanted to show strength and make humanity bow again, but the humans did not move, they did not speak, and they did not show fear. Their transmissions stayed silent. Their fleets stayed hidden. The calm of the Sol system was like the deep breath before a storm. Every ship, every soldier waited in silence, knowing that one mistake could start something that would change the galaxy forever. Far from Earth, in the black emptiness near the edge of human territory, a Council patrol group found something strange. A large object floating among the asteroids. It looked like a wreck, but it gave off faint power readings. The alien commander ordered his ships closer, thinking it might be an old human cargo vessel. When the first scout ship approached, the object came to life. Its dark hull shimmered and unfolded like wings. It was not a wreck. It was a warship, a human warship built with new technology. The ship sent no words, no threats. Only a single energy pulse that disabled the patrols. Systems one by one, the alien crews panicked, trying to restart their controls. But before they could react, a beam of white light cut across the void, and the patrol ships vanished in seconds. The human warship turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving only silence. When the news reached the council, panic spread. The humans had attacked without warning. The council declared the act as open rebellion and called for an emergency session. They claimed they had no choice but to act or lose authority over the galaxy. But even as they prepared for war, many delegates hesitated. They remembered what had happened to the patrol fleet, and they feared what else humanity might be hiding. The High Chancellor ordered the formation of the Grand Armada, the largest military force ever assembled. It consisted of hundreds of ships from dozens of races, all gathered with one goal: to crush humanity before their influence spread further. Back on Earth, the Terran Alliance watched through their hidden observation satellites. They had expected this. They knew the Council would strike once they lost control, and so the humans prepared for what they called the inevitable. Strike fleets were deployed across the outer systems. Stealth stations were activated and defense networks aligned. The great dreadnoughts like the Retribution and Aegis stood ready near Mars, their hulls gleaming under the light of the sun. They were not just ships, they were symbols of what humanity had become. When the Council Armada entered human territory, they expected resistance, but not what they found. The first system they reached was empty. The planets had been evacuated, the colonies gone. It was a trap, and they did not even see it as the alien fleet spread out searching for human bases. Their sensors began to fail. Radar systems went blind. Communications were jammed suddenly from the darkness. Hundreds of small human ships appeared, moving fast and silent. They struck like shadows, targeting engines and communication relays rather than weapons. Before the Council ships could organize themselves, half their fleet was drifting helplessly in space. The humans vanished again without taking a single loss. The Council leaders were furious. They demanded that the next wave push deeper toward Earth and destroy everything in their path. But every time they advanced, they found nothing, only empty systems and ghost signals. The humans fought differently. They refused to fight for territory, they fought for survival. Every battle was planned to confuse and exhaust the enemy, not to destroy, but to break their will. The alien commanders had never seen such tactics before. They were used to quick victories to opponents who begged for peace. But the humans gave them no words, no negotiations, only silence and precision. Inside the command center on Mars, General Arik stood before the main tactical display, watching the enemy movements. His officers reported every detail calmly, their faces hard and focused. The general did not speak much. He simply gave short orders and watched as the battle unfolded. He knew that every human ship out there was fighting not just for their own lives, but for the future of their entire species. He knew that if they failed, humanity would be erased from history. Like all those before them, he could not let that happen. Across the solar system, ordinary people watched the news from secure channels. They saw the reports of the Council fleets entering human space, and they waited with hearts full of fear and pride. They knew that somewhere out there their sons and daughters were fighting in the void, defending everything they loved. There was no talk of surrender, only unity. Everyone helped however they could. Farmers shared food with soldiers. Engineers repaired machines around the clock, and children drew pictures of the ships they believed would protect them. The world had become one family. The Council Armada continued to lose ships and morale. Each encounter ended in confusion and loss. Entire fleets disappeared into asteroid fields, never returning. Others were lured into mine traps hidden within gas giants where their sensors failed and their engines tore apart. The Council commanders began to argue among themselves, blaming one another for the failures. Their soldiers whispered about the humans, saying they were ghosts that struck from nowhere and vanished like smoke. Some even began to believe the humans had created weapons that could bend light and time. The fear grew with every lost battle. Then came the first real confrontation. The Council Armada regrouped near the border of the Sol system, determined to break through. No more traps, no more chases. They moved in formation. their weapons charged and ready. They expected the humans to hide again, but this time the humans came to meet them. The Aegis led the fleet, its massive hull reflecting the light of the nearby star behind it. Came dozens of other dreadnoughts, carriers, and cruisers, each moving with perfect coordination. When the alien sensors detected them, the Council commanders hesitated. The readings were impossible. The humans had built more ships than anyone thought possible, entire fleets that had never been seen before now appeared out of the black void. The two armadas faced each other in silence for a moment. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then the first shot was fired, and the stars lit up with war beams of light cut across space. Explosions flashed like distant suns, and the silence was replaced with chaos. The humans fought with unmatched discipline, their ships moving like parts of one giant machine. They targeted command ships and supply vessels, cutting off the head of the enemy. Before striking the rest, the Council fleets fired back with everything they had, but the human shields held strong, and their weapons burned brighter than ever. In the middle of the battle, the Aegis moved forward. Its captain, a calm and steady woman named Lyra, watched the enemy lines through the main viewport. Her crew waited for her command. She gave none for a long moment, then simply said, "Hold the line." The words carried through every channel, and every ship heard them. The human fleet tightened its formation and advanced together. Their combined firepower turned the enemy center into dust. The Council ships began to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The humans had already surrounded them. What began as a massive invasion turned into a desperate flight for survival. When the last Council ship was destroyed, the battlefield went quiet again. Debris floated in the void, and the stars shone. Through the wreckage, the humans did not celebrate. They did not cheer. They simply began rescuing survivors, both human and alien. Their medical ships picked up those who could be saved and treated them without hate or revenge, because even in their fury, humanity had not lost its soul. They fought for truth, not cruelty, and that made them even more terrifying in the eyes of their enemies. The survivors who returned to the Council worlds spoke of the battle in fear. They said the humans fought like something beyond mortal. They said their ships moved like living things and their eyes burned with purpose. The Council tried to silence the reports, but the stories spread faster than they could control. Soon every planet in the galaxy had heard of the Battle of the Border, and how the humans had stood against the greatest armada ever assembled and won. The galaxy began to change that day. Small rebellions started in distant systems. People who had suffered under the Council's rule began to hope that if humans could fight back, then maybe they could too. On Earth, the leaders of the Terran Alliance gathered once more in the chamber. Beneath Mars, the room was filled with quiet voices and tired faces. They had won the first great battle, but they knew it was only the beginning. The Council would return with more fleets, more lies, and more rage. General Arik stood before them and said in a low voice, "They will come again. But now they know who we are. They know that humanity will not kneel ever again." His words were simple, but every person in that room understood their meaning. The time of fear was over. Humanity was no longer a young species seeking approval. They were now a power that the galaxy could not ignore. The meeting ended. The humans looked out at the stars through the viewing glass. The wreckage of the Council fleet drifted silently in the distance, a reminder of what they had achieved, but also of the price they would pay in the wars yet to come. The people of Earth did not sleep that night. The forges continued to burn, the shipyards continued to build, and the soldiers continued to train because they all knew that the storm was far from over. The Council would never forgive what had happened, but neither would humanity forget their lies. The fury that had been born in silence had now spoken through fire, and it would not rest until justice was done. The Council chamber was filled with chaos the moment news of the defeat arrived. Delegates shouted across the hall, their voices filled with fear and anger. They could not believe that a single species could destroy the largest armada ever assembled. The High Chancellor tried to speak, but his words were drowned by the noise. Some accused humans of using forbidden weapons, others said it was dark magic or ancient technology from a lost age. No one wanted to admit the truth that humanity had outsmarted them and beaten them with courage and skill. Alone, the image of the burning fleet at the border spread across the galaxy, and the people who had once feared the Council now began to whisper in secret that the humans had done what no one else dared to do. They had stood up to the Council and survived. The Council tried to hide. The truth, they banned the transmission of battle reports and silenced witnesses, but information spread faster than they could control it. Smugglers, traders, and refugees carried the story from world to world, and everywhere it went, the people began to question their rulers. They started asking what else the council had lied about, and why entire histories had been erased for centuries. The council had ruled by fear, but now that fear was cracking, and through those cracks, the light of rebellion began to shine. In the outer colonies, riots broke out. Protests filled the streets. Soldiers refused to fire on civilians. The galaxy was changing, and it was humanity that had started it. In the heart of the Sol system, the mood was different. There was no celebration. The humans knew that victory had come at a terrible price. Many ships were lost, and countless soldiers had given their lives to defend their home Earth, held quiet vigils. For the fallen, families gathered under the stars to say goodbye to those who would never return. But even in sorrow, there was pride. Humanity had done the impossible, and they knew the war was not over yet. The Council would come again stronger, and, angrier than before, the Terran Alliance did not waste a single moment. They began rebuilding what was lost and improving everything they had built. Before the shipyards on Mars worked day and night, the engineers created better armor, faster engines, and weapons that could strike with greater precision. General Eric stood on the bridge of the new command station orbiting Earth, looking at the blue planet below. It was peaceful and beautiful, and he wondered how long that peace would last. His second in command approached with new reports showing the movement of Council forces across several sectors. The general studied the data in silence, and then spoke in a calm, low voice. "They are coming again, and this time they will bring everything they have." The officer nodded and replied, "Then we will show them everything we are." Across human colonies, the spirit of unity grew stronger. Every man and woman understood their duty. The miners of Titan dug deeper to supply rare materials for the fleets. The scientists on Europa perfected the Dawn network, which was almost ready to send its message to the entire galaxy. The soldiers trained harder than ever. They no longer fought for survival alone. They fought for freedom, for truth, for every species that had been silenced by the Council. The humans had become more than just a race. They had become a movement, a spark of resistance that was spreading far beyond their own worlds. Meanwhile, on the Council's capital world, the High Chancellor held a secret meeting with his closest advisors. He slammed his hands on the table, his face pale with rage. He shouted that humanity must be destroyed before their ideas infected the rest of the galaxy. He ordered the construction of new fleets larger than the first one, and demanded that their most powerful weapon be completed: the Exterminus Array, a massive superweapon capable of burning entire systems in one strike. It was designed long ago, but never used because of its destructive power now. The Council intended to use it against Earth. They believed that if they erased humanity completely, no one else would ever dare to rebel again. Back in the Sol system, the Terran Alliance received intelligence about the weapon through the Dawn network. Spies hidden in Council territories confirmed that the Exterminus Array was being built in orbit around a dying star near the center of Council space. The humans knew that once it was completed, nothing could stop it. They had to act fast. General Arik called a meeting with the Alliance Council leaders, and commanders sat around a long table, illuminated by the faint blue light of holographic maps. The general explained the situation clearly. If that weapon fires even once, humanity will cease. To exist, we must destroy it before it is finished. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he said was true. The mission would be dangerous, maybe impossible, but they had no choice. The operation was named Silent Strike. It would require a small fleet to travel deep into enemy space undetected. Destroy the Exterminus Array and return alive. The Aegis and Retribution were chosen to lead the mission. Their crews volunteered without hesitation. Every soldier knew what was at stake the night before: departure. The crew gathered in the hangar of the Aegis, standing under the glow of the stars visible through the transparent dome. Captain Lyra spoke to them, her voice steady and filled with conviction. She said, "We fight not just for Earth, but for every world that lives in fear. We will show them that truth cannot be destroyed and lies cannot rule forever." Her words echoed in the silent air, and every soldier felt their heart burn with courage. The human fleet left quietly, their engines hidden, their signals masked by false transmissions. They slipped through the dark regions of space, passing broken worlds and forgotten ruins left behind by the Council's past purges. As they moved closer to the core of the galaxy, they began to pick up strange energy readings, faint but powerful. The exterminus array was near it, orbited a red dying star, its metal structure stretching for miles, glowing faintly like a beast asleep. The humans approached carefully, hiding behind asteroid fields and using the star's radiation to shield their presence. Their plan was simple: strike fast, destroy the power cores, and escape before the enemy could react. The first phase went perfectly. Human strike teams used stealth pods to land on the massive structure. They moved through its metallic corridors, planting explosives on the main energy conduits. Everything was quiet until one of the alien patrols spotted them. The alarm sounded across the entire structure. Red lights flashed and hundreds of enemy drones came to life. The humans fought fiercely, their rifles echoing through the halls while explosions shook the metal walls outside the Aegis, and Retribution opened fire, destroying the enemy defense ships that swarmed around the array. The battle turned into chaos. Fire lit up the dark star field and debris rained into the void. Inside the array, Captain Lyra led her team through the smoke and fire toward the central core. They reached the main control room where the massive energy reactor pulsed like a living heart. She looked at her team and gave a single nod. They activated the charges and ran as the countdown began. Outside, the human fleet fought to hold the line, giving the strike teams enough time to escape. When the timer reached 0, the entire array exploded in a blinding flash. The shockwave rippled through space, lighting up the dying star like a second sun. The human ships were thrown off course but managed to recover. The mission was a success. The weapon was gone. When the news reached the Council world, the High Chancellor could not believe it. His masterpiece, his weapon of fear, was destroyed by the very race he had called weak. He smashed his fist against the table and shouted that humanity would pay for their defiance, but his words no longer carried the same power. The Council was divided. Some members now questioned the Chancellor's leadership. Others secretly sent messages to Earth offering information or even aid. They had seen what humanity could do, and they began to believe that maybe the Council's time was ending. Back on Earth, the returning fleet was welcomed, not with cheers but with quiet respect. The people knew the cost of what had been done. Many brave soldiers had not returned. Their names were spoken with honor, and their stories became symbols of human strength and sacrifice. The Terran Alliance broadcasted a single message across the galaxy, through the Dawn Network. The transmission contained the truth about the Council's corruption, the hidden purges, the erased worlds, and the manipulation of entire civilizations. The message spread faster than light, reaching billions of people across the stars. The galaxy saw the truth, and the Council could not stop it. Rebellions erupted everywhere. Worlds that had served under the Council for centuries now rose up, demanding freedom. The once mighty empire began to crumble, its fleets stretched thin, trying to control the chaos. But the tide had turned. Humanity had not only defended itself, it had ignited something far greater. A movement of liberation that no one could stop. The Council tried to send fleets to punish the rebels, but their own soldiers began to desert, refusing to fight for lies any longer. General Arik stood once again before the great window of the command station. Looking at the stars, he knew the war was not over. There would be more battles and more losses. But now humanity was no longer alone. The galaxy had awakened, and it was because they had dared to stand against tyranny. He turned to his officers and said quietly, "We started this fight for our survival, but now it has become something more. We fight for the freedom of all, and we will not stop until the stars themselves are free." His words were carried through the Alliance networks as a promise. Humanity's fury had broken the silence, and now it burned brighter than ever. And across the galaxy, every enslaved world looked toward the stars, whispering the same words: humanity fights, we fight too. The galaxy was in turmoil. The once mighty Council that had ruled for thousands of years now found itself surrounded by chaos. Rebellions burned across dozens of worlds. Their communication networks were collapsing, and their fleets were stretched thin, trying to control the uprising planets that had once bowed to their power, now turned their weapons against them. And in the middle of this storm, humanity stood tall. They had become a symbol of hope for all who dreamed of freedom. Every ship, every soldier, every human knew that the final battle was coming, and that the future of the galaxy would be decided soon. On Earth, the Terran Alliance gathered its leaders for what they called the Meeting of Destiny. General Arik stood before a large holographic map of the galaxy. Blue and red lights marked human and council territories. The map showed that the council's power was shrinking fast, but the core world still remained heavily fortified around the ancient planet. Vornis, the birthplace of the council. Their last stronghold was being prepared for war. Intelligence reports revealed that the council was gathering what remained of their fleets there to make one final stand. General Arik looked around the table and said quietly, "This will be their last fight, and ours too. If we win, the galaxy will be free. If we fail, everything we have done will be lost forever." Captain Lyra, who had survived the mission against the exterminator Ray, sat across from him. Her uniform still scorched from past battles, she said in her calm voice, "They will not stop until we break them completely. We cannot give them time to rebuild. We must strike now," the others agreed, but they all knew the cost of such a decision. The human fleet was powerful but tired from years of fighting. Resources were low, and many ships were damaged, yet the fire inside every heart still burned strong. They all decided that humanity would launch one last offensive. The operation was named Dawn's Fury, because it would be the storm that ended the night over the next weeks. The Terran shipyards came alive like never before. Thousands of workers and engineers labored day and night to prepare the fleet. The massive warship Aegis was repaired and upgraded with new energy shields and plasma cannons. The Retribution was fitted with the latest stealth drive, and a new command center on Mars directed the construction of hundreds of smaller support ships. The entire Sol system became one great engine of war. Even the civilians helped. Miners sent materials. Scientists built better weapons. Children wrote letters to soldiers telling them to come home safe. Humanity was united like never before. While the humans prepared, the council tried to do the same. The High Chancellor was no longer the confident leader he once was. His face was pale, his eyes full of fear. He gave desperate speeches to his remaining generals demanding they crush humanity once and for all. But even among his own ranks, loyalty was breaking. Some of his admirals secretly sent information to the Terran Alliance. Others refused to fight. Entire fleets defected or disappeared into deep space, and the Chancellor realized too late that his empire was crumbling from within. He began to rely on old weapons and forgotten technology, unleashing machines that had been buried for centuries. Machines that did not care who they killed as long as they destroyed the enemy. When the day came, the human fleet gathered near Jupiter. Millions of soldiers watched from the observation decks as the fleet formed in silence. Thousands of ships lined up, their engines glowing blue against the darkness of space. General Arik stood on the bridge of the command ship, resolute, and looked at the endless rows of ships. He knew that many of them would not return, but he also knew that their courage would be remembered forever. He gave the order to begin, and one by one the ships vanished into the void as they jumped toward the Council core worlds. The journey was long and dangerous. The humans had to pass through regions filled with debris mines and traps left by the Council. Several ships were lost to sudden ambushes and collapsing wormholes. But the fleet pushed forward. Every loss only made them more determined after days of travel. They finally reached the outer defenses of Vornis. The entire system was surrounded by battle stations and weapon platforms so large they looked like floating cities. The humans could see the glow of their weapons charging from across space, and then the battle began. The first wave of human ships broke through the outer line, their cannons lighting the darkness with blue and white fire. Explosions filled the sky like burning suns. Fighters swarmed across the battlefield in every direction. Missiles streaked through the void, leaving trails of light behind them. The sound of the battle could not be heard in space, but the energy pulses made the ships tremble as if the galaxy itself was shaking. Captain Lyra led her squadron through the chaos, dodging plasma fire and destroying enemy bombers that tried to reach the command ships. She shouted orders calmly while her ship moved with perfect precision, weaving between explosions like a ghost. The Council forces fought fiercely. They had more ships and more firepower. But the humans fought with a unity and courage the Council could not understand. Every time a human ship fell, two more took its place. The Retribution charged into the heart of the enemy fleet, firing its heavy cannons at point-blank range. tearing through enemy cruisers one after another. General Arik ordered the second wave to push deeper into the system toward the planet itself. He knew that if they could destroy the defense grid around Vornis, the Council would be finished. On the surface of Vornis, the Council's last armies prepared for invasion. They looked up at the sky where the battle raged like a storm of fire. The High Chancellor watched from his tower as flashes of light covered the heavens. He whispered to himself that the Council would not fall, that he would see humanity burn before that happened, but deep inside he knew it was over. He ordered the activation of the final weapon, a massive orbital cannon hidden beneath the planet's surface. It was capable of destroying an entire fleet with a single shot. The ground shook as the weapon powered up energy waves rippling through the atmosphere. On the Resolute sensors detected the surge of energy. General Arik immediately realized what it was. He ordered every ship to focus fire on the planet's surface to destroy the cannon before it could fire. The human fleet redirected all power to their weapons. Beams of energy shot down from orbit, striking the ground like thunder. But the cannon continued to charge its power, rising with every second Captain Lyra took her ship lower into the planet's orbit, flying through heavy fire to target the cannon directly. She shouted to her crew to prepare the main torpedoes when they were in range. She gave the command to fire. The torpedoes hit the cannon's outer shell, but it was not enough. The weapon fired one last desperate shot. A massive beam of light erupted from the surface, slicing through space and hitting several human ships. The shock wave spread across the battlefield, throwing vessels off course. Captain Lyra's ship was caught in the blast and damaged heavily. Alarms screamed and fire spread through the control room. She managed to stabilize the ship and ordered the crew to continue the attack. She knew this was their only chance. The humans regrouped and unleashed their full power on the cannon. The ground cracked open as hundreds of explosions ripped through the structure, until finally the weapon collapsed into the burning core of the planet, and the light went out, with their last weapon gone. The Council fleets began to retreat, their ships scattered in all directions. Trying to escape the destruction, the humans pursued them, until the last enemy ship fell silent. When the smoke cleared, the sky above Vornis was filled with wreckage and burning debris. The battle was over. General Arik stood in silence as he watched the planet below collapsing under the weight of its own destruction. He felt no joy, only relief and sorrow. He knew that millions had died on both sides, and that war always left scars that never healed. The human fleet sent out a single message across the galaxy: the Council has fallen. The words echoed across every world, every colony, every system that had once lived in fear. People celebrated in the streets. They tore down the symbols of the Council and raised new banners of freedom. Entire species sent messages of thanks to humanity, calling them the saviors of the stars. But on Earth, the celebration was quiet. People lit candles for the lost and whispered prayers for peace. The war was over. But everyone knew that rebuilding would be even harder than fighting. General Arik returned to Earth months later. He was greeted not as a hero, but as a leader who carried the burden of every soldier who had fallen. He visited the graves of those who had died, including Captain Lyra, whose ship had never returned after the final battle. He stood there for a long time in silence, then looked up at the stars and said softly, "We fought for freedom, and now we must protect it forever." Humanity had changed. They were no longer just a single race from a small blue planet. They had become the guardians of a new era across the galaxy. New governments were formed, new alliances were born, and the galaxy was finally quiet after the fall of the Council. But silence in the stars did not mean peace. Debris still floated across the void. Burned ships from both sides drifted endlessly as reminders of what had been lost. Whole planets were scarred by war, cities were gone, colonies were empty, and people who had once lived in fear were now unsure of what freedom really meant. Humanity stood at the center of it all. No longer the hunted, no longer the oppressed. They had become the leaders of a new age, but leadership was never easy, and peace was not something that appeared just because the fighting stopped. General Arik knew this better than anyone. He spent every day looking at reports from the recovering systems, hearing stories of both hope and pain. On Earth, the people tried to rebuild. The cities glowed again with light. The factories that once built weapons now produced machines for farming and medicine. Children went back to schools that had been closed for years. But not everything was simple soldiers, who had seen too much war found it hard to live in peace. Families who had lost loved ones still cried at night, and even among the leaders, there were disagreements about what humanity should do next. Some wanted to retreat and rebuild, quietly focusing. On Earth, others believed humanity had a duty to guide the galaxy to protect the new freedom they had won from ever being destroyed again. One morning, General Arik stood at the window of the command center in New Geneva. He watched the sun rise over the rebuilt capital. It looked peaceful, but his mind was restless. Messages came every hour from different parts of the galaxy asking for help. The outer colonies begged for food, the newly freed worlds wanted protection, and the alien species that had joined the human alliance were asking for guidance. He knew they could not help everyone at once, but he also knew that if they did nothing, chaos would return. He turned to his officers and said softly, "We did not fight a war to watch the galaxy fall apart again. We will help them all, even if it takes everything we have." In the months that followed, humanity began sending aid ships across the stars. Massive convoys of cargo vessels carrying supplies, medical teams, and engineers. The fleet that had once been made for war was now used to rebuild planets destroyed by the Council people across the galaxy. Watched as human ships arrived, not with weapons, but with hope. On one world, they restored power to cities that had been dark for years. On another, they rebuilt schools and hospitals, using materials from old warships. Even the alien races who had once hated humans began to trust them. The sight of the Terran flag became a symbol of safety, but not everyone was happy. Some remnants of the Council still existed hidden in distant systems. Small groups of warlords and old commanders refused to surrender. They believed humanity would become a new empire, and they wanted revenge. They began attacking the aid convoys, stealing supplies and spreading lies among the people, saying that the humans planned to rule the galaxy by force. Again, the attacks became more frequent, and soon the peace that humanity had fought so hard for began to tremble once more. When news reached General Arik that several aid ships had been destroyed, he called an emergency meeting. His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with fire. He said, "We cannot allow the shadow of the old council to return. We must end it completely." Captain Lyra's old crew, now under the command of her first officer, volunteered to lead the mission. They knew her spirit would have wanted them to finish what she started there. Ship the Horizon was fast and silent. Designed for deep space pursuit, they were tasked with finding the last council stronghold and ending the threat once and for all. For weeks, the Horizon searched through abandoned systems and broken space stations. Following faint traces of energy and old transmission codes, finally they found it hidden inside a dying star system. A fleet of stolen ships and weapons led by the last surviving council general. His name was Serac, and he had vowed to destroy humanity. Before he died, his ships were old but powerful, still carrying technology from the ancient days of the Council. When the Horizon approached the system, they were met with immediate fire, the sky filled with plasma bolts and missiles. The human crew fought back with precision. Their ship danced between explosions, returning fire with calm focus. The battle lasted for hours, and when the smoke cleared, the Horizon had won. But Serac's flagship was still moving. He refused to surrender. General Arik ordered the main fleet to jump into the system and finish it once and for all. The human ship surrounded Serac's fleet. Cutting off every escape route, Arik opened a channel and said, "You have lost. There is no honor left in this surrender," and Liv Serac appeared on the screen. His face full of hate and pride, he said, "You think you can bring peace to the galaxy? You will fail, just as we did. Power always corrupts, and soon you will become what you destroyed." And then he cut the channel and ordered his ship to self-destruct. The explosion was massive, brighter than the nearby star. For a moment it looked as if the galaxy itself was burning. Then silence returned. When the light faded, there was nothing left of the Council, only dust and memory. Humanity had finally ended the war completely. But Arik could not forget Serac's last words. They echoed in his mind. Power always corrupts. He knew there was truth in them, and he was determined to make sure humanity did not repeat the same mistakes. He ordered that no single race, no single government should ever control the galaxy again. Instead, he called for the formation of a new council, not of rulers but of equals. Every species that had fought for freedom would have a voice in it. They called it the Galactic Union. and it would be the first government built not on fear but on trust. The first meeting of the Galactic Union was held on Earth in the Great Hall of Peace. Delegates from dozens of worlds came together for the first time. Humans, aliens, and even machine races who had once served the Council all sat at the same table. General Arik stood before them and said in his deep, steady voice, "We have all suffered, we have all lost, but now we have a chance to build something greater, something that will last longer than any empire. Let us make sure that the blood we shed was not for nothing. Let us build a home among the stars for all." The hall was silent for a long time. Then one by one the delegates stood and agreed to the proposal, and that was the beginning of a new era. From that day forward, the galaxy began to heal slowly, but surely humanity did not rule over others. They guided and protected, helping where they could, teaching what they had learned. About unity and sacrifice, the great warships that once brought fear were now used as peacekeepers, watching the borders and keeping pirates away. The name of the Terran Alliance became respected, not because of power, but because of honor. Years passed, and peace began to feel real again. Children grew up without knowing the sound of war. People traveled freely between worlds. Trade flourished and cultures mixed. Even the farthest colonies began to feel connected, as part of something greater. General Arik, now old and tired, retired from his post. He spent his days in a small house near the ocean, watching the waves. He liked to sit on the porch and look at the stars at night, thinking of all who had been lost and all who had survived. One evening, a young reporter visited him, asking what he thought about the future. Arik smiled faintly and said, "The future belongs to those who remember the past and protect it with kindness. Not fear, that is what it means to be human." After he passed away, a statue was built in his honor. Not on Earth, but on the first alien world that joined the Union. The inscription beneath it read, "He fought not to conquer, but to free," and that became the message that defined humanity in the centuries that followed. No longer the weak, no longer the rebels, they had become the guardians of the stars. When people looked up at the night sky, they no longer saw darkness, they saw unity and hope. And they remembered the time when humanity's fury had burned brighter than any sun, and how from that fire a new world had been born, one that would never again be ruled by lies or fear, but by the strength of truth and the courage of those who dared to stand for it forever.